Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Chelsea. Welcome to a city that has to, on a daily basis, endure environmental impacts that other cities and towns in our country do not have to endure. We know that those who live in black and brown communities breathe air which is different than those who live in suburban communities. This is an environmental justice community. This is a community that has historically borne much greater environmental adverse conditions than suburban communities. During the COVID crisis, obviously people who lived in Chelsea had been much more exposed to environmental hazards than other communities. There had already been a pre-existing higher level of asthma in Chelsea that then made them more vulnerable to the effects of the COVID disease. And it showed up and down every single street here in Chelsea. So we know that we have to deal with these issues. We know where the heat islands are in our society. So we stand here this morning with the dangerous reality, and it's one that could not be any more clear. Our planet is sweltering. Our people are suffering. The planet is running a fever. There are no emergency rooms for planets, and we have to take preventative measures in order to protect our planet, our country, and communities like Chelsea from the impacts of rapidly accelerating climate change. Over the last few years, Massachusetts has been under both a federal heat advisory and a local heat emergency. Earlier this month, we experienced what might have been Earth's hottest day in 125,000 years. You heard that right. The hottest day in 125,000 years on our planet. And we're likely to keep breaking temperature records over and over again this year and next year and every single year to come in the future. On every one of those issues, it's very clear. The climate scientists, the community leaders have been right, and the oil and gas and coal industry have been wrong, but they've been wrong because they've been lying about what they knew scientifically was going to happen to places like Chelsea, to our community. Across the nation this month, nearly 1 in 3 Americans were living under an extreme heat alert. This extreme heat isn't just a coincidence. It's the climate crisis announcing its arrival. We need to take bold action to stop the climate crisis and secure a livable future. And we need to act fast to combat the rising health risks of extreme heat we're experiencing right now. I am grateful that President Biden understands the seriousness of this problem and announced steps this week to protect worker safety and measures to improve weather forecasts and make drinking water more accessible. But we must do more to make sure communities have the resources they need to survive extreme heat events, especially frontline communities who experience heat effects that are worsened by already unjust racial and economic divides. That's why today I am announcing the reintroduction of the Preventing Heat Illness and Deaths Act. This life-saving legislation would give our federal government the resources and authority to meet this moment with the urgency it requires by, 1, establishing a $100 million financial assistance program to make sure communities have the tools they need to combat extreme heat locally. And 2, empowering the federal government to begin tracking, studying, and warning of the extreme heat threat so that we can better respond and prepare for it. My legislation focuses on urban communities which are particularly vulnerable to the health impacts of extreme heat due to the urban heat island phenomenon, which can cause some neighborhoods in cities like Chelsea to be more than 20 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the surrounding communities, and especially suburban communities. That's the difference between an unpleasant 90-degree day and a deadly 110-degree day. Resulting in part from the practice of historic redlining, these communities have less tree cover, more pavement, and consequently higher temperatures. The $100 million financial assistance program in the Preventing Heat Illness and Deaths Act would fund critical cooling projects in urban areas. As our planet continues to heat up, we have to be able to cool down. My legislation takes on the urban heat island effect by giving cities and states the resources to plant trees and invest in cool pavement, just like they've done here with the Cool Block project. Workers are collapsing, wildfires are raging, and this heat is not going anywhere. Most heat-related deaths and illness are preventable, though through outreach and intervention, but extreme heat events have been the leading cause of weather-related death in the United States over the last 30 years. Let me just say that again. Extreme heat events have been the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the United States over the last 30 years. Not tornadoes, not hurricanes, but rather extreme heat. That is what has been killing people in the largest numbers. We have a clear opportunity to save lives and loved ones. Congress just can't stand on the sidelines. The sirens are sounding. We are in a climate emergency, and Congress should be the first responders, not holding the matches. It is time we pass my Preventing Heat Illness and Deaths Act and create the national response to this national crisis. We are right here in Chelsea, where because of historic inequities, it's going to be a lot hotter here than it is in suburban communities in Greater Boston today, just in terms of the tree cover, just in terms of the amount of pavement and concrete that is here in Chelsea. We just have to know that and know that these people are much more vulnerable as a result to heat stroke and potentially to death. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Patricia Fabian, Associate Director of Boston University's Institute for Global Sustainability and Associate Professor of Environmental Health at the BU School of Public Health. Through her research and teaching, Dr. Fabian focuses on health and environmental health disparities. Dr. Fabian's passion for leveraging research with solutions makes her a force for good. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Markey.
No, of course, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to speak today. As Senator Markey said, my name is Patricia Fabian. I'm an associate professor at Boston University School of Public Health. For 4 years, I've been working with Green Roots on mapping and measuring extreme heat around the city, where we live, work, and play, inside homes and in parks. We've worked with residents to understand their exposure to extreme heat, informing adaptation solutions, and influencing cooling policies. What have we learned? Chelsea is a heat island. That's not a surprise. On hot days, the average temperature is about 6 degrees warmer than what's measured out at the weather station in Logan Airport. You can see some of our sensors up in the trees over there for those of you who are here. Within Chelsea, there's heat islands and this larger heat island. So there's neighborhoods that are about 9 degrees warmer, which we've measured with our sensors downtown compared to the neighborhoods that are out by the waterfront. Mostly due to lack of trees and to the high percentage of impervious dark surfaces which trap heat during the day and then reflect it back at night. Youth on Green Roots Eco Crew have measured temperatures, for example, on park benches that are 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And residents have documented how those parks aren't used on really hot days because of lack of shade, water features, and hydration stations. We learned that residents adapt to heat in many ways. Fans, air conditioners, going to stores with air conditioning and parks with shade, but also that there's many challenges to staying cool. The lack of tree equity, keeping trees alive, getting dehydrated, the ability to pay utility bills to cool homes, poorly insulated housing that makes it hard to keep homes cool, and exposure to extreme heat traveling to and from work and school. Although each community is unique, the challenges that Chelsea and East Boston have are faced by many environmental justice communities across the United States. As the COVID pandemic showed us, what makes residents vulnerable to COVID can also make residents vulnerable to extreme heat and other climate disasters. So what are solutions? The block we're standing on is called the Cool Block. And it was selected to test cooling interventions because it's in a heat island within Chelsea and because it's really densely populated and lots of youth come here, and youth are vulnerable to extreme heat as well. On this block, you can enjoy this community park, which was designed with input from youth and adult residents and installed with volunteer labor from residents, students, Green Roots, and city staff. Dozens of trees were planted actually along the two streets that kind of flank the block. And neighbor residents have adopted trees to water them during hot weeks so that they survive. The city refinished pavement to be more reflective, and there's a plan to paint black rubber roofs over the Boys and Girls Club white to reflect heat. Because of all these activities, we've already measured changes in heat reflectivity looking at satellite photos of this block. Other solutions we're working towards include cooling policy changes and leveraging decarbonization and weatherization interventions to increase resilience to extreme heat. This Cool Block is a really great example of how small climate resilience projects can grow when different stakeholders come together with a common purpose. The project started really small, and through our engagement work, led mainly by Green Roots, has expanded to connect many partners: scientists, residents, city staff, companies, nonprofit organizations, and students. As we work towards other solutions to tackle climate hazards, we need the same transdisciplinary, community-engaged approach. This will ensure that climate resilience solutions are community-specific and that vulnerable populations and communities like Chelsea benefit the most. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much, Doctor. And now we're going to hear from great State Senator Sal DiDomenico. Thank you for coming out.
Pleasure. I'm dressed for the weather. See this?
Good morning, everyone. I'm dressed for the weather today, so I'm out of my uniform today, but I wanted to be here just to say a couple of things about why this bill is so important for cities like Chelsea, and to thank Senator Markey for always being there for our communities. You know, Senator Markey, historically, as we all know, has been a leader in climate change since his very first day in office. And he was talking about this issue long before people were talking about it in the mainstream, because he knew, and he had the foresight to know that this was going to be a problem coming to us sooner rather than later. And what I love about Senator Markey is that he leads on national climate change, but also makes sure that our local residents get what they need to address the local climate crisis in our own neighborhoods. And that's not easy to do. That's not easy to do. National, and bring it down locally to make sure all parties are impacted, that are impacted have a say and are taken care of. So this legislation is very, very important for communities like Chelsea. You know, the residents that I represent in Chelsea and in Everett and Gateway communities across our communities, and the EJ communities as well, many of the residents don't have time to stand up and fight for themselves. They're out there working day to day trying to survive. And they need leaders that are going to step up and take on these challenges that are impacting their lives every single day. And Senator Markey has been doing that, and we're just very grateful to him for filing this legislation and making sure that communities like Chelsea and communities like Chelsea across the entire nation are taken care of and are recognized and acknowledged for the hardships that we have in these communities, and ways to address the hardships and make sure that people get what they deserve. A good place to live, to raise their family, and to go to work and really contribute to society. And when we look at Chelsea historically, we know the inequities that have existed here for a long, long time. And we know that this legislation will go a long way to helping residents in my communities to combat that. and to take advantage of the great work that Senator Markey is doing and his colleagues are in Congress to ensure that our residents in Chelsea and Everett and EJ communities are not forgotten across the nation. So it's really important for us to be there and acknowledge that. Thank you very much for always being here. He's almost like a Chelsea City Councilor. He's here so often. So we're very, very lucky to have a person who's not just a U.S. Senator, but a friend to the city of Chelsea and a friend to so many communities across our state. So thank you, Senator Markey.
Thank you, Senator, so much. Obviously, here Judith Garcia does so much great work on these issues as well here in Chelsea, and is a fighter to protect the community from the most adverse impacts from climate change. So let me just stop right there and answer any questions that you may have about anything.
When you say $100 million, it sounds like a lot of money. Divided by 50 states, you're talking $2 million a state. Seems like a drop in the bucket given the scope of the problem you're trying to address.
It's not what ultimately is going to be necessary for the totality of the problem, but it's a good start. It's a beginning. It's saying that obviously there's a problem and that we have to make sure that we provide at least the initial funding that can then be leveraged by cities like Chelsea to be able to provide the protection for their citizens which they need. So yes, $100 million is only a beginning. I think as each year goes by, people are going to recognize that this problem is only going to get worse. When the water off of Key West is 101 degrees, when a forest fire in Canada continues to burn and the smoke is over the city of Boston and Chelsea, when the greenhouse gases that are being emitted from that forest fire is equal to 1/5 of all of the greenhouse gas savings from the Inflation Reduction Act from our climate bill last year, we know it's going to get worse and worse. And we know that $100 million is nothing more than a good start, but we must start.
Shouldn't the oil, gas, utility companies be contributing to this effort? And how do you get them to contribute when they're spending money that would be very appreciated in this effort, when they're spending those kinds of sums to lobby Congress to not push these things?
Yeah, we have to continue to deploy green energy technologies in red and purple states. We have to continue to build the public interest movement around this issue, and as those jobs get created in the green energy sector, we're going to see the politics of this issue change, and that the people who are going to be most adversely affected are going to get more and more allies from people who work in the clean energy sector, people who realize that their families are now being negatively impacted by what is occurring. What we're seeing here today in Chelsea is just a preview of coming atrocities. The heat, which is going to reach a level which is going to be catastrophic in terms of the danger that it's going to pose to citizens, especially those citizens who are black and brown, most vulnerable in urban heat areas. So, question?
Well, that was it. The traditional utilities put all the effort on, not contributing to these efforts and actually killing them. How do you counter that?
I think the day of reckoning is going to arrive much more quickly than anyone thinks. I believe that that young people, especially the Sunrise Movement, college activists, Gen Z in general, puts climate change at the top of their agenda. And every year that fewer and fewer baby boomers vote, and every year that more and more Gen Z voters register to vote, we're going to see a dramatic change in the way in which the political system responds to climate change. The era of denial is over, and now the political activism is going to begin to put the pressure on the oil, gas, and coal industry so that funding now goes not just to clean energy technologies, but also to remediating the harm which is already built into the system for communities that are vulnerable like Chelsea. So there's definitely a political change which is now in motion, and we're going to try to make sure that we accelerate it. That's what today is all about. That's what Chelsea is doing here in making sure that we have the leadership which we're going to need. And towards that goal, I see that we're joined by Judith Garcia, the great state representative here from the city of Chelsea. Whenever you're ready, Representative, please come up.
Thank you, Senator. First and foremost, Senator Saul, nice to see you too. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for putting Chelsea at the forefront. I am actually, full disclosure, late because when we talk about climate change and the crisis, I'm actually dealing with families here in Chelsea who were affected by a flooding, and we are under a flooding watch, and a lot of them were displaced, unfortunately. And when we talk about impact, when we talk about communities who are facing the brunt of the climate injustices, this is it. And I thank you for always centering Chelsea in your agenda of equity, in your agenda of really focusing on fighting this climate injustice, because you have an understanding of the real life impacts that has. So I appreciate the fact that you're introducing this bill that focuses a lot on those health risks. So thank you for doing that, Senator. Thank you for always putting Chelsea in your forefront, and thank you for really making the investments that can help us fight this. So thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to be here, also with our Senator Saul DiDomenico, that for years has also been a champion of this community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. Again, any questions for myself or Representative Garcia or Senator DiDomenico? Love to take them.